Hello, and welcome to my channel. Today's tragic tale takes place in Mazatlán, Mexico. Mazatlán is in the state of Sinaloa and on the shore of the Gulf of California and Pacific coast. Mazatlán is a place where people from other countries take up residency due to the affordable housing and the beautiful landscape. A lot of retired Americans relocate there. There is a cruise port, and the coast is filled with all-inclusive resorts in what is known as the Gold Zone. Now, on to the story of 52-year-old O'Neil McGean. O'Neil grew up in Chevy Chase, Maryland. As mentioned in a previous video, he was also involved with Brian Betts for more than a decade, beginning in 1990, but the two had parted ways but still remained friends. O'Neil relocated to Mazatlan in 2006. When Brian was murdered in 2010, O'Neil flew back to the U.S. to attend Brian's memorial. At the time, he said he was going to be more cautious about using online dating services. O'Neil met a man named Jorge sometime after moving to Mazatlan. Jorge is on the left in this photo. Some reports said the two dated. The Mexican papers referred to Jorge as O'Neil's assistant and translator. February 14th, 2014, O'Neil opened a restaurant called Cafe Playa Sur in Mazatlan. American papers said O'Neil and Jorge opened the cafe together, but the Mexican papers say Jorge was only an employee. O'Neil was also the manager of the Mazatlan condominiums. It's been said he owned or managed other businesses during his 10 years in Mazatlan. On October 25, 2016, O'Neil left his home to meet up with someone he had been communicating with online. According to Jorge, O'Neil had left the house at 8 p.m. to meet up with someone at the Hotel Punta Pacifico. On October 26, Jorge contacted O'Neil's brother Donnie via Facebook Messenger and told him O'Neil had not returned home and that O'Neil's dogs had not been fed. In this picture, Donnie is on the left and O'Neil is on the right. Donnie hopped a plane from his home in Maui and was in Mazatlan by October 27th. At 3:30 on the 27th, Jorge reported O'Neil missing. A small group of friends worked with Mazatlan mayor and Sinaloa governor and American consulate to organize a search for O'Neil. Donnie met Jorge at the Hotel Punta Pacifico, the hotel where O'Neil was to meet up with his date. The hotel employees denied seeing him, and a drone was flown around the area, and there was no sign of O'Neil or his car. Donnie and Jorge were dining at a seafood restaurant when Jorge received a message from O'Neil's phone, except the message wasn't from O'Neil. They were for someone demanding $26,000, and that a portion of that money needed to be deposited in a bank account, which the person failed to disclose information about. Jorge demanded to see a picture of O'Neil to confirm that he was okay, but the person replied, "You don't give the orders here." The McGeans had relatives who were retired from the DEA, so Donnie was able to contact the FBI and asked to trace his brother's phone. October 28th, groups were formed and a search for O'Neil began. On October 29th, O'Neil's white Chevy Spark was found in this hotel parking lot by friends. The vehicle was filled with trash and beer bottles. Jorge and Donnie arrived to find police dusting the vehicle for fingerprints. One officer pulled Donnie aside and told him that Jorge may be involved. Donnie disregarded this, just as he had when friends of O'Neil said he had recently fired Jorge from the cafe shown here and banned him from his home. Now the FBI became involved. Donnie had a hard time believing Jorge had anything to do with his brother's disappearance. He said Jorge had been distraught over O'Neil's disappearance and even suggesting suspects to the police. Donnie and Jorge had been spending every day together and staying in the same house at night since Donnie came to Mazatlan. Jorge acted as a translator for Donnie. Jorge had posted several recent pictures of himself and O'Neil together in the days leading up to O'Neil's disappearance. Jorge would post the two of them together 2 to 3 times a month, so it may not have seemed unusual. This picture was posted on October 9, 2016. There was many other photos from this day and this party. Several people were in attendance. This one was posted on October 22nd. There were others with them on this day too. This one was taken on October 23rd. The last time O'Neil posted the two of them together was on May 17, 2016. On October 31st, both Donnie and Jorge met up with the mayor who wanted this solved as soon as possible. O'Neil was very well known in the community. He donated money to several causes and hosted fundraisers at the cafe to raise money for organizations in need of help. Since he was so high profile, this was major news, and the mayor feared it would affect tourism. Shouldn't he have been concerned with the disappearance of a man who helped the community? Definitely misplaced concern. Later that same day, Donnie met with the prosecutor handling O'Neil's disappearance. The prosecutor asked Donnie what took him so long. The prosecutor told Donnie that he had told Jorge he needed a family member to sign off on the investigation. In Mexico, not only is having a family member sign off before an investigation begins a law, but they also will not release the names of suspects to the media until they are convicted. Between October 30th and October 31st, Jorge made these two posts on Facebook. On the 30th, he cautioned against speaking about O'Neil on Facebook on behalf of the family. On the 31st, ironically, he changed his profile picture to the last picture O'Neil posted of the two of them together back in May. November 1st, Donnie and Jorge went back to meet with the prosecutor. The prosecutor prohibited Jorge from entering the room this time. The prosecutor showed Donnie a timeline of phone communications between Jorge and the suspects. Donnie assumed this was Jorge attempting to get information from the suspects. November 2nd, Mexico was on day 2 of celebrating the Day of the Dead. Donnie walked the streets among other partygoers and stopped in a bar to call a kidnap expert, who told Donnie straight up, "If you're hoping your brother is still alive, chances are he is not, because the kidnappers stopped communicating on October 27th. Donnie left Mazatlan the following day. November 4th, warrants were issued to search a home on Lopez Mateos Street in Azteca neighborhood. O'Neil's body was found at the house owned by one of the suspect's sisters. Two of the suspects were present at the supposedly vacant home. They were both taken into custody. O'Neil was buried in a suitcase covered in lime underneath a freshly poured concrete slab. Since Donnie had left Mazatlan, authorities contacted O'Neil's younger brother Chris and told him O'Neil's body was found and that Jorge had been arrested. Chris called Donnie and gave him the news. Donnie went back to Mazatlan to identify the body. The FBI told Donnie not to look at his face, so Donnie had identified him by an Irish family crest tattoo on his shoulder. November 5th, arrest warrants were issued. As I stated before, the media is not giving names until a conviction. However, people close to the investigation had released full names. Mexican newspapers listed first and middle names only, and that is what I'm going to do. Jorge Antonio, Carlos Ramon, Luis David were arrested. Carlos was already in custody for possession of drugs. A fourth suspect, Joel Carrillo, was also charged, but the police were unable to locate him. November 7th, the three suspects stood before a judge and prosecution to hear charges. In America, this would be arraignment. Donnie gave an interview later that day to a news channel in Mazatlan. I have posted the link in the description. November 10th, another hearing was held. The judge ordered that the three suspects would be detained until March 11th, 2017, What this means in Mexico is that the investigation would continue until March of 2017 and then expire. During that time, the investigation must find, per the judge's ruling, that the suspects committed the crime of homicide with premeditation, robbery, and advantage in the death of O'Neil McGean. This means the prosecutors had 4 months to prove the suspects committed those crimes, and it is determined that they are guilty, they would spend 22 to 50 years in prison. For those like me who are wondering what the charge of advantage means, in Mexican law it means several things: strength over a victim, uses weapons to coerce a victim, premeditation, manipulation, harming, or weakening of a victim. November 14th, 2016, the prosecution listed out the details of the crime. Some of the details came from a confession that Carlos had made. He tried claiming that he was tortured into giving a confession. The details are as followed. October 24th, Jorge approached Joel to set up a Facebook profile so he could befriend O'Neil on Facebook and set up a date. The newspaper said it was a dating app. It wasn't. It was Facebook. Speaking of Facebook, remember this photo? It was taken on October 23rd, the last time Jorge posted a photo of him and O'Neil, just the day before he enlisted Joel to help him seal O'Neil's fate. Jorge knew how much money O'Neil had in his bank accounts. He knew his tastes in men and his weaknesses. He wanted Jorge dead, and he needed Joel to carry this out by enticing him with all the money O'Neil had. In order to rob O'Neil, Joel would need a way to get money out of the bank, and that required someone who knew how to do bank transfers. Joel enlisted his relative Carlos, who knew how to do online transactions, and he became involved along with Luis. The Facebook profile was created using Carlos' picture. However, it was Joel who struck up a conversation with O'Neil. They made plans to meet up in a hotel the following night. October 25th, Carlos, Joel, and Luis were preparing to get a room at the Pacific Palace Hotel, but they had no money, so they used a hammer to threaten and rob an unnamed person of 2,000 pesos. Carlos checked into the hotel room under the name Jacob Lorenzaro. O'Neil arrived at the Pacific Palace Hotel later that evening. Remember, Jorge had told Donnie it was Hotel Punta Pacifico, but when they went to check on the hotel in October 27th, the hotel denied that he had been there. Carlos met O'Neil in the hotel lobby. Carlos and O'Neil entered room 8003 and got comfortable before Luis and Joel emerged from the closet. The three men beat him and stole his bank cards, tied his hands together and tied his feet together, and placed a gag in his mouth. They continued to beat him until he gave them his PIN numbers. Then they gave him sleeping pills. They knew he had 500,000 pesos in his bank, which translates to $25,369.51 in US dollars. Carlos went to 2 ATMs in the gold zone that same night, while Luis and Joel guarded O'Neil. October 26, Carlos used two different cards to withdraw $482 from ATMs. This is what the business district looks like in the gold zone. It is 1 block away from the resorts. Carlos also used O'Neil's phone to transfer $15,475 to his bank account and one of Joel's cards. Joel went to various banks to withdraw money. However, when Carlos tried, he was unable to withdraw money because he didn't have an ID. Carlos paid 2,000 pesos to what is referred to as a coyote, known as a smuggler, to help him obtain an expedited driver's license from the Road and Transportation Department. Once Carlos was able to withdraw the money, he rented 2 rooms at the Solamar Inn Hotel, where the other 2 men met, and they split the money 3 ways. Warning, details will be shared. You may want to skip this part until you see a map on your screen. These details are going to be very violent. On the night of October 26th, they beat and drugged O'Neil with eye drops. They beat him so badly that his lungs were punctured, which caused him to go into cardiac arrest and resulted in his death. The morning of October 27th, Luis and Joel returned to the hotel and used tape to wrap up O'Neil's body in plastic and bed sheets. They put his body in a large suitcase in a fetal position. They put the bloody bedding, towels, and curtains in another suitcase. Joel and Luis took a taxi and transported the suitcases to a house 23 minutes away on Lopez Mateo. Carlos rented a car and disposed of O'Neil's Sam cards and Costco cards along with other personal items in this area. All of this happened on the morning of October 27th. Remember, that was the afternoon when Jorge reported O'Neil missing, then that evening engaged in text messages with O'Neil's kidnappers, all the while knowing that O'Neil was already dead. December 3rd, 2016, two memorials were held on the same day, one in Washington, D.C. at Blessed Sacred Church, shown here, and another was held in Mazatlan. When Donnie and Chris were cleaning out O'Neil's home in Mazatlan, they found a framed collage of photos of Brian, Betts, and O'Neil together. They found several children's books that Brian had written notes to O'Neil in. November 2017, a year after the three suspects were convicted, Donnie wrote a letter to Sonoma government stating that he felt that his brother's case had been put on the back burner because there was still one more person who was responsible for his brother's death who was free to walk the streets. He never got a response, but found out later that the governor is the owner of the hotel where Brian was murdered. O'Neil was remembered by friends and family as a person who made an impression. He had a larger-than-life personality that attracted people to him. He loved Mexico and loved the Mexican family values, and his friends loved him back. He was a businessman who gave back to the community. He is deeply missed by those who knew him and his generous soul. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.